Everybody, this is your main man, Anthony Brogdon, and let me tell you, I got a smooth guy on my channel today. He's so smooth, let me tell you how smooth he is. He said, man, I want to do the interview. What I want you to do is go to my calendar, look up my appointments and stuff like that, and then you choose a day and time. I've never done that before. And I was like, oh man, cool. That made it easy for us to do this, because let me tell you, I really believe he wanted you to know the history that he's about to share on this channel. I'm Anthony Brogdon, and you at Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser, where the people do the talking. We are international here at Strong Inspirations. I'm gonna go fast only in this regard. You know that I got videos out of Africa, out of Ireland, out of London, out of Australia, out of Jamaica, and more of that international talk to come. And all throughout America, we're talking about some of everything. Did you see the one I did with the NBA player, first Black player's son? It's on the channel, watch that one. Did you see the one I did with Madam C.J. Walker's two-time great-granddaughter? Woo-wee! Watch that one. Did you see the one I did with Frederick Douglass, three-time great-grandson? Woo-wee! Watch that one. And I'm telling you, the guy that's on is going to blow your mind. He's a conscious guy. He's got good stuff to tell you. Now, just a couple more things. Freedom Quindera, my Black History Festival, is coming along. People are slow signing up, but I got a feeling that something is about to break, and I'm gonna be there. So come on down to Kansas City, Kansas, Memorial Day weekend. I'm gonna blow your mind. We're gonna have a good time in what I would like to say America's largest underground railroad stop. We're gonna party where they stood, walked, fled, and all that, and honor those ancestors. Memorial Day weekend. It's all on my website, businessintheblack.net. Couple more things. You know, I got, here you go. My man got me nervous. He got me nervous. He about to tell it to you. Check it out. This is my movie, Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. Is streaming on Amazon. And something is happening, because I had a lot of people, about 1,000 people watched it in the last week. They're telling people about this. Watch this. Slaves who went to college, slaves who own businesses and used their money to buy their freedom. I list names and tell you the stories in this film. I got this book out. Come on and get your copy. I had a good number of orders in the last 2 weeks. So I ordered some more from my printer, and they are in. I ship them out the same day you get them. And right now, I'm having a little issue with Amazon. So please just go to my website, businessintheblack.net. This book is good, it's thorough. If you read my book and don't learn nothing new, I give you a money back. A book with a money back guarantee. Boom, shakalaka, here it is. Check it out. Get you a copy of this, everybody. And it's very reasonably priced, because I'd rather you have it than me. You can buy more than one and give them away. Black business book. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. I love the word strong. I've been saying strong things for a long time, and I'm going to continue to do such. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong man. Watch out. Good looking guy too. You gonna like this man. I'm telling you, watch out. Brother, thank you for coming on the channel. Tell us your name and let's get it on.
Thank you, sir. Good to meet you, and good to share our story on this. My name is George Garner, and I serve as the Assistant Director and Curator here at the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center.
All right, all right. Thank you for that. I got to ask a couple questions about you personally. That's kind of what I do. Some artists get to know my guests. Where are you originally from?
So I was born in New York, born in Staten Island, but grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania, and then kind of bounced around the East Coast for a while, doing my undergraduate and then a master's degree in museum studies. And that's how I ended up in the Midwest, a different museum than this one. But I've been on staff here now for about 9.5 years.
What now growing up Staten Island, I've been in New York quite a few times. Let's just talk about that. What is Staten Island? What kind of community is that? Were you on one side of the street and is it a multicultural kind of community?
I mean, I don't know that much. I was 6 years old when I left Staten Island,
Okay.
right? So I don't, I don't remember much, and I wasn't able to process much.
Okay.
I know that I have a long, I have a long ancestry in Staten Island. Allegedly, one of my ancestors, they have a farmhouse in one of the local one of the local history museums there.
Okay.
So it used to be, it actually used to be farmland, or more kind of like rural. My grandmother grew up on a small farm next to what's near the hospital, right?
In Staten Island?
In Staten Island, but as
Okay.
New York grew, and particularly as cars came in and people were able to kind of commute more freely, Staten Island really became kind of a bedroom community.
Okay.
For people that were working.
Let me go back a little bit further. Where are you all? Everybody is an immigrant from somewhere that everybody migrated. You know what I mean? How they all got to New York and then.
Sure.
Well,
the way I understand it, and I'm not sure how much I can believe this, because apparently I had an ancestor or an aunt of mine who did this genealogy. If I'm to believe her work, frankly, I'm a little skeptical of it. But
okay.
I'm descended from British royalty.
Oh, really?
I don't think that's true.
Okay.
We came over on one of the Mayflower voyages. I don't think that's true. I'm descended from Zebulon Pike, who discovered Pike's Peak in Colorado. It's this. I don't see it as at least my ancestor story as one of immigration. I see it as one of colonization. When we talk about what that meant, for people from the European colony or from the European continent to come to this continent and come and incredibly displace a thriving culture that was here, the indigenous peoples that were on this continent, tens of millions of human beings who were so radically disrupted by those coming from Europe over here, and in incredibly harmful ways.
Okay, let me go into that just a second. Well, now, first of all, the indigenous are the Indians.
Right.
Same word, so to speak. That's what that means. And so people from Europe came here because they heard of the opportunity here in America and the new land. Right?
I mean, in some cases, yeah, but
Okay.
and we can look at that, but we also, I think it's really important to kind of look at it through a lens of who was really impacted. So an opportunity for one was incredibly harmful for another.
Sure. Okay, and then I'm gonna stay on you just a tad more. So then you left there and went to where from Staten Island?
When my family left Staten Island to move to the Poconos, to move to Northeast Pennsylvania.
Okay, yeah, the Poconos, that's beautiful country there.
It's really pretty.
So let me ask you, where's your love begin for history? And then maybe even more so, that's one part of the equation, and then even Black history. How do you get to do this?
So that's a really good question, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint, but for some reason, I had always just loved shows and movies about time travel.
Oh,
the
really?
ability to just take yourself out of the place that you're in and go to this other place that might have been somewhat familiar and somewhat recognizable, but still so completely different. I mean, I was a huge fan of movies like Back to the Future and Quantum Leap and all of those things. Really love them, but I didn't understand anything about how somebody could turn that into a career. And I remember vividly, I was 13 years old, right? We went back to New York to visit Ellis Island, right? Again, this place where so many European immigrants
Yeah,
came
right,
from.
sure.
Yep. And you may know, like, so that's this big room where people had been kind of funneled through and processed. And in above kind of this big room, there's almost like a little like a bridge around it where you can walk through. And in one, they had this little, plaque right there. There were 3 photographs, and each photograph was taken by a photographer standing exactly where you were. And those photographs were of different decades. So I don't remember what it was, but one might have been like the 1910s, and then one was like the 1930s, and then one was like the 1950s. So you could see this place that you were in through those different decades and how radically different. And I felt like I was traveling through time by watching those photos, right? Didn't understand how that could turn into a career at all. Went to college first to be a computer science major, because I guess that's what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
But just again, took history classes, loved history classes. I was getting straight A's in my history classes, and my computer science grades were just plummeting. I was starting to get C's and D's.
Sure,
At some point, I'm like, something's wrong here.
Sure.
Stuck with history. Did an internship at a museum in Northeast Pennsylvania. Just met people who introduced me to the idea of museums as a career, as places where we tell those stories, where we do that work of learning about, not just the national story, but the local story, right? And how those two kind of interact. And ended up getting going to a graduate program, the Cooperstown graduate program in history and museum studies in upstate New York.
Okay.
It's been directed by an African-American woman for, I think, about 30 years now.
Okay.
And so, I had always been, aware of injustice and aware of that story. But like so many other people, I didn't get kind of the full picture of that. And I was fed this inaccurate idea, right? I was fed this myth. Was fed that myth again of discoverers coming over from Europe and discovering all these things, settling, and again, as I explained before, that's a fundamentally wrong thing. And we hear the story of enslavement, and so often the violence and the horror and the incredible disruption in people's lives gets kind of divorced from that. So it's just, as I started progressing and as I started learning more and as I started really understanding more of that, it just, kind of snowballed and snowballed and snowballed.
Yeah. Let me stop you there. Let me ask you this. You could have studied a bunch of different kinds of history.
Yeah.
But Black history is your forte.
Yeah.
But okay, how about this? You could have studied, let's say, the Revolutionary War and did your life on that.
Yeah.
Or some other topic. But it all has a connection to Black history somewhere along the line. Am I right on that?
Yeah, American history is Black history, period. You cannot tell one without the other.
Well, okay, we're gonna get to the story on another note, but I gotta ask you, because you're a conscious guy, and I think you don't mind this. Does this make you cry to hear these stories? Have you ever cried? You know what I mean? To hear that, where like, wow, these people were vicious, or whatever term we want to use.
Sure. Yes, sir. I not only have cried, but just, sometimes just the weight of what human beings are capable of to each other can be too much. And quite frankly, I would really start to be worried about myself if I didn't cry, or if I didn't feel something, whatever, however that gets expressed. I would really start to worry if I become too desensitized to that.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you become desensitized at some point? Because you do this every day.
Yeah.
You tell some story in your museum every day. Is there like an exhibit in the museum or something that I can't walk past? You know what I mean?
I think so. And I don't think I ever get at least too desensitized. And again, I really hope that I never do. So when you come to this space now, we're going to talk a little bit about what the space was. But when you come to the space today, it's been transformed from what it was. But even though today, we radically welcome as many different people as we possibly can. This is a space of community gathering. This is a space of healing. This is a space of understanding and learning. When you come here, you can both see that story on our walls. So we do have a permanent exhibition that tells it, but often there's a human being here who can walk with you and tell that story with you. And I'm often that person. We have students from Indiana University as well, other staff members, but somebody will be here to engage you in a conversation about real, honest, open history.
Well, a lot of times when we talk about the telling of the story, depending on who tells it, they try to slant it some way. To now we you understand that the guy says they liked being enslaved, or we did them a favor. Are there stories that you have to honestly say, have you ever heard this, and that is completely false?
Most of the time when somebody comes in this wall, when somebody comes into this space, they're open to understanding. So it is very rare that I've had to engage somebody who's completely wrong, but it has happened. And I'm not interested in lying to people. That's what it comes down to, right? I think any honest understanding of reality, of what happened, of history, brings you to a place where you can't ignore, or if you were to say that, like you said, like somebody might believe that people who were enslaved like that, that's not an honest understanding of that history, right? That's not truth. That's not real.
Right.
And I'm not interested in lying. I'm not interested if I'm interested in honestly learning and discovering reality. And that's where I come to in a place like this is when I engage with people, it's not to slant, it's not to say anything other than truth, but it's a hard truth. Truth is difficult. And I do prep people to let them know, when you come here, you're not necessarily going to hear the a happy story, right? There are, of course, happy moments. There are moments of power. There are moments of people gathering to fight against injustice. There are people that do the hard work and have done the hard work for 100 years, for 200 years, for 400 years, right? People who do that hard work. But even through those moments of power and moments of joy, it is in the backdrop of this incredibly difficult conversation.
What is a good day for you? When you're at work and somebody walks in, and maybe they're on the complete opposite side of wanting to be there, even to hear the stories, and then you tell them something that makes them go, aha. Is that a good day?
That is a good day, and that happens a lot. And I'll give you an example of a good day and there are a lot of good days here.
Yes.
And so many, it's hard to choose, but one just happened just last week. Woman joined here, an African-American woman raised in the South, but moved to New Jersey. Her daughter is working in our community. So she came to visit her daughter, and her daughter went to work, and she was just going to visit all this historic sites. She and her husband had this dream of going to all 50 states. And when they do, her husband really loved history. So, they went to all the historical sites. Her husband passed away last September. So she's told us, she came here because she wanted to be here kind of with him and to learn our story. She said, we were the first one on the list. And for her to trust us and for her to trust me, to share that story and to tell this history was just, it was a gift to me. It was a privilege to be able to do that. And so, I would definitely call that a good day to be able to do my job.
Because what you did was enlighten her and educate her.
Yeah. And again, this is, as an African-American woman, she knew, even though she didn't know South Bend's story, she knew the story, right? She knew it from other places, right? She knew it from her own existence and from her own life. But yet still, we're able to talk, we're able to expand, we're able to give kind of more detail and nuance. And again, South Bend's story, what was happening in this community.
Yeah, so let's go into the museum. Now, the name of the museum is what, and what's the history of it?
It is the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center. That's what we call it today. But it wasn't that. It's that the existence of that in this building is a small portion of it. It started its life in 1922 as the Angman Public Natatorium. was the city of South Bend's first indoor municipal swimming pool. And it was an indoor pool. We believe it was about 20 yards long. It was about 6 lanes wide. This was the first, right? And this was in an era where, you know, more people now are leaving rural areas and coming to urban areas. You know, industries are really starting to grow. And this is true for, you know, so many people now are starting to move to cities, including African-American people who are escaping the incredible violence in the South.
Right.
The rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the rise of sharecropping, you know, the new kind of white supremacist hierarchy and caste system that's evolving at the end of the Civil War. And so in the midst of millions of people leaving the South to come north, they're coming to industrial cities to be able to do that kind of industrial work. And South Bend, Indiana, you may know, is the home of the Studebaker company. Started its life as a covered wagon manufacturer in the mid-19th century, but one of those companies to transition into automobiles. Okay. And they made cars from the 1920s through the 1960s.
Okay.
So again, it's, you know, South Bend is growing, and it's Studebaker and it's so many other companies were expanding in huge numbers. And that's why we grew big enough to have this indoor pool. But the lens that we look at it through is that word public, because I said that was part of the title, right? And they actually, you know, somebody did the work to carve that word. It was carved right into the concrete edifice right out front. So anybody who was able to come into the space walked under the word public in order to do so. What I do know is that in 1925, 1 out of every 5 white people in South Bend was a member of a terrorist organization known as the Ku Klux Klan.
Is that right?
1 out of 5. And so the way
let me stop you there. Yeah. But in South Bend and Indiana, it's not considered a southern state.
It is not considered a southern state. This is a northern state, right?
Yeah.
Indiana fought on the side of the Union against the South and against enslavement. But and it gets so complicated because Indiana, as the South was engaging in Jim Crow laws, as the South was codifying in law separate but equal, Indiana had a pro-civil rights law on the books in the 1880s. But that law didn't get enforced. You know, it's that incredible push, again, from the South to the North and the change in most cities. Indiana or South Bend had roughly only a 1% African-American population. And that was true basically through to World War I, 1920, give or take.
Sure.
600 individuals in 1920, or 600 individuals in 1910. But by 1920, that number doubled to 1,200. And then by 1930, that number almost tripled to 3,400.
They were coming there for the jobs at the steel companies and that kind of thing.
Bingo. And well, Gary had a lot of steel. And this is the thing. I know you're in Detroit, right? So you have the same story as we do. And Chicago has the same story, and Milwaukee and Cleveland and Buffalo. It's all the same story, escaping the most brutal form of racism and violence in the South and trying to find other opportunities in the North. And that period, I don't think we give enough credit. It's one of the largest movements of human beings. History. This is a huge thing. And it completely transformed cities like Detroit, like Chicago, like like South Bend. We're one of those things.
Now, when they moved there, what side of town do they live on? What's the black side? What's the white side of town in South Bend?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It was the west side, and I don't care what city you're in. It's going to be one of those cardinal directions, right?
Yeah.
It just happened to be the west in South Bend. That was one of the only places that African-American people were allowed to get homes.
Was there something about the west side? Was it close to downtown? Was it less desirable in landscape? Something like that?
Less desirable. Mostly, I mean, it started off as mostly swampland. So this was among the least desirable land. It was, close-ish to downtown, but a lot of the factories were, if not on the river, mostly on the west side as well. So this is, again, we're adjacent to the factories. It was some of the least desirable land. And it's overly complicated, right? I'm kind of simplifying. That's basically true.
Sure. I understand that. Now, and the white side was just called the east side?
I mean, white side was everywhere else. I mean, frankly.
I got you. What's the main thoroughfare of the Black community neighborhood where the businesses? I know they sprouted up their own set of business. Was there a street like that most of them were on, that kind of thing?
And this evolved mostly in the kind of middle to the second half of the 20th century, but West Washington, Linden Avenue here, around that was, again, during segregation, you needed an analog, right? If you couldn't go downtown, you needed to go somewhere else. Right. So yeah, Black-owned business district evolved around there. And it's actually just about, like 5 or so blocks west of where I'm sitting.
Oh, okay. That leads in this question. So your museum and the swimming pool, was it on the Black side of town or like not necessarily?
Well, in 1920, it was, it was just, again, the 1% of the population, it was still really small, right?
Yeah, right.
But we were kind of on the outskirts of downtown. The point that you make is a really important one, because from 1922 to 1936, in spite of the fact that African-American people had been in the city since before there was a city, right?
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that they were a growing portion of that city, in spite of all that, in spite of the fact that the white people who ran this place used the word public on the front, African-American people were denied entry. And then beginning in 1936 to 1950, it's segregated by day. And so we asked then, what did it mean that the people who ran this pool, frankly, the people who look like me, used that word public? That was an act of violence. And it, again, impacted tens of thousands of people for at least 30 years.
On the Black day, and then the white day was the next day, did they do something as drastic as drain the pool?
Good question, because that comes up a lot, man. As best as I can tell, it's not possible for them to have done that. And let me make that case as to how, right? So when you think about it, well, that's the thing. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense. It's not a toilet that you can just flush and in 30 seconds, it's done. Right. And this has been confirmed over and over. It takes, anywhere from like a day to a day and a half to drain it. And then you've got to refill it, and that's another day and a half. But then, there's chemicals that go in that water to keep it clean. So you got to get the chemical balance right. You got to have somebody do testing and make sure that when this pool opens, the water is clean. That process can take anywhere from 3 days to possibly as much as 5. If you're only open 1 day a week for African American people, that math doesn't add up.
Right.
So now, though, who benefits from that story and who gets hurt by that story? And where does that come out, right? Obviously, if you're white, you get the perception that the water is clean. And if you're of color, you get the perception that this is not a safe place and you're not going to go. So actually, because at first, few African-American people were using this pool. This was not a safe place. This was not like they opened the doors up and that people were just happy and clamoring to come in. That is not the reality. This was
okay. Hold on, let me stop you there. When you say it's not a safe place, you meant that if you got there, you could be subject to somebody beating you up or something like that?
Well, I don't know about that, but again, how is this place that told you, told a person of color that this is, you weren't allowed in? Again, for 14 years, it completely excluded African-American people. And now all of a sudden they're going to allow people in for 1 day a week. This is not, it's not something that people felt, this is because this was denying your very humanity. That's what I mean by safe.
I got you.
And other swimming places kind of naturally grew. There was a place locally called Pinhook Park. It was on the St. Joseph River. The water was not treated, right? So it was dirtier water and there was no lifeguard on duty. So it was, there was that, but you knew that's where your friends were going to be. You knew that you weren't going to get harassed. That's where people went. They didn't necessarily come to the natatorium.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why the city, changed it from 1 day a week to 1 day a month.
Oh, really?
But even then, still, again, if it takes days to drain and refill, this place is for a week for that. So that story, though, right? And the myth that kind of came from it, because we hear over and over again that people thought that they drained it, but I've never heard anybody say, "Oh yeah, I did it. Like I saw them."
Yeah, I got you.
The one that drained it. I heard they did it.
Yeah. And let me ask you this then. So is there a story of protest to integrate the pool at some point and it's a rallying cry over any other spots? This pool is something that's public, and you've alluded to that. We're going to march in front of this pool. We're going to protest. Are those that make the change?
Well, I'm not aware of any like kind of that form of protest. There were at other places, St. Louis, Missouri, I believe, had what they call swim-ins, right, where a number of people would come and demand entry, and then kind of overwhelm, and then come in and make that kind of mass protest. This was a focus of civil rights action, but just not in that particular form. And that's not a judgment on any form or another, right? This is what happened here. So this was mostly a middle to upper class group of mostly African-American doctors, lawyers, politicians, working within the system to try to impact, to try to make change. And it took them 30 years or 20 years at least, right? Some of the earliest challenges were in 1931. To the exclusion of this space. And it took until 1950 for it to at least officially become desegregated. Now,
when that happens, desegregate, did the races mix? Or not necessarily so, and it just, you know what I mean? Okay.
It became a lot more complicated, right?
Yeah,
and a lot less clear.
Yeah.
So we've heard stories. So I never say this place integrated, because that's not necessarily true.
Yes.
I've heard stories that, and it's just, depending on who was working the ticket booth that day, they might let in a bunch of white children. And then if somebody else were to try to come in, all of a sudden they'd say, oh, sorry, we're full. And again, that kid didn't know, right? So, we've heard those stories. We've heard others, other similar stories as well of, people trying to sign up for classes, but being told, I don't know if I'm allowed to let African-American children in. But then, I've heard other stories too, where at least one person in the 1970s said he used to swim there in the 70s. And he didn't, he swam with other white people, and he didn't know that history of it. By the time the 70s came around, some people who experienced it remembered that story, but it wasn't popularly known. And for a lot of white people too, if I hear a lot from white people who were here in the 50s and 60s, they were like, I had absolutely no idea. As far as I knew, it was an integrated pool that was mostly white, maybe, but there would still be some African-American coming in. They were completely unaware of that history that had happened maybe just 5 or 10 years before they were there.
Sure. So now when I think of a building with a big swimming pool, I don't think of much room for exhibit space to have what you have. Did you all take out the pool? Is the pool still there?
And that's the thing, they did take out the pool. Yeah, it made the most. I mean, so the building closed in 1978 and sat as a vacant and abandoned building for almost 30 more years. And it really is, it's Indiana University South Bend students that led the transformation. So we do a class called Freedom Summer, and we do this basically every 2 to 4 years. We're set to do another one actually next month. And students board a charter bus and they drive through the US South, and they learn the story of the 1950s, 1960s movement for Black justice in the places that it happened at, right? So they go to places like Selma, Alabama, of course, right? With the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They go to Birmingham with the 4 little girls. They go to Montgomery and learn Rosa Parks' story. They're going to Atlanta. They're going to, the Mississippi Delta. They're going to all these places, and at every stop, they meet somebody who was a part of that history. And they come back radically transformed and really wanted to know what South Bend's story was. And they didn't know. There was no place for them to learn that. And that's how we got formed on the campus of Indiana University South Bend in the history department with the mission of studying local history. And we do, our first project was an oral history project that exists to this day. Find the old timers, sit them down in front of a tape recorder and get their life story. And that's yielded about 160 different interviews. And when they were doing those interviews, hearing the natatorium as a place of segregation kept coming up over and over and over. And this was a surprise to some of those students, right? They would drive by though and see a vacant and abandoned and boarded up building, and really started wondering, can we change it? What steps can we make in order to make some change? and started leading IU South Bend faculty and staff, and partnered with the city, who still owned the building, and partnered with our neighbors who were fierce advocates for this space for years, trying to find some way to transform this vacant building. It all came together, and we reconfigured the building to get rid of the pool, because it was just in really bad shape.
Yeah, sure.
We didn't need the pool anymore, right? That wasn't a story anymore. So the front third of the building remains as the historic edifice, as the front, as the face. But what used to be the girls' changing room got reconfigured into an event space and changing.
Okay.
So we do regular events out of there. The boys' changing room got reconfigured into a classroom and a lending library. So people from the community can just, come check out books. Classes from all the local universities come here. We've got K through 12 students coming in. And then the pool itself got transformed into a contemplative peace garden. It's actually modeled, it's inspired by the peace garden behind Dr. King's home in Montgomery.
Oh, really?
And so again, intentionally drawing that line between the Southern and the Northern stories of segregation. But it's an outdoor garden, again, where folks can come, sit, read, have lunch, whatever it is that they're doing.
Is there a permanent exhibit of and I'll let you tell what that is.
It's a permanent. So the permanent exhibit is photograph and text, right? That again tells that story.
Okay.
So if you're coming here for an event, you can learn that story that way. Like I said, there are human beings here during the open hours as well that will tell you that story. Our story isn't one of, we don't have a ton of stuff. And I think that's okay. We do collect, but it is a relatively small space. So our story is told not necessarily through the stuff, but through those photographs, and again through people like myself that engage you directly in conversation.
As we come to a close, so to speak, do you all also try to become a archivist type location? Absolutely. And ask people in Indiana or who've left or what otherwise to come and let us hold those documents, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So we're the place for South Bend and the surrounding community. We're that trusted repository. And this is where, because we're part of Indiana University, we can leverage the resources of this statewide university system to protect and especially to share and provide access. Because that's deeply important. It's one thing to save something and keep it in a box somewhere, but it's not accessible easily, or as easily as we can possibly make it. Yes, that's our job, and that's what we try to do.
Well, I want one more question, maybe. What would you like to see happen at the museum? Is there an exhibit in particular that you all would like to do research on, of some sort? Indiana, South Bend history, some of the buildings that were there, depiction of that, any of that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's always so much more to learn.
Yeah, right.
I've been doing this job for 9.5 years. I feel like I barely scratched the surface.
Oh, really?
We do. In fact, we're in the process of revising. In 2013, we launched a local landmark tour of sites of significance to African-American history. It's a great tour, and just its only flaw right now is that it's almost 9 years old. So we're in the process of revising that with new signs and a new website and things like that. But people then can not just see this one site, but almost 20 others that tell that story as well.
I got you. Give us the name of the museum again, the website, how people can support it, and so on and so forth.
Go to our website. It's just crhc.iusb.edu. It's the Civil Rights Heritage Center through Indiana University, South Bend.
Love it. So everybody, this is what I do here at Strong Inspirations. I find these conscious people, good people, that somehow this is on their heart to tell these stories, to live this every day. And check it out, every now and then to cry when you hear the story, to be that conscious. You're never immune to it. And it is history. Nothing that can be done about history, but just to tell it. I thank you for coming on this channel and being the guy you are and doing this as a career path and enlightening people. And you're becoming better, I'm sure, along the way.
Do my best, sir.
With that, I'll say, and I say this with all sincerity, and I mean this, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. I love that you're, and Indiana University has opened up their heart to make this happen. With
Thank
that,
you,
I'll say
sir.
bye-bye, we out.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you.
Peace.